Hello, welcome to Julie's Unknown Podcast. And this is episode 9. Episode 9, yes. And this episode, what I want to talk to you about today is the 2-4 profiles. So in human design, if you do not know about human design, it is the most awesome thing ever. Really has created a lot of aha moments, has shifted a lot of things in my life, and continues to do so, and the learning never ends. Basically, it is kind of like an astrology chart, but a little bit different at a deeper level, but it gives you these signposts and understanding yourself, who you are, and the signposts of like when you are in alignment, when you are out of alignment. It shows you your fears, it shows you your gifts, it shows you how to tap into your intuition, shows you, what environments are correct for you, how you process information, how you process food. Like there's just, the learning never ends. And if you don't know about human design, you can head up to my YouTube channel, and in there I have an actual section on human design, and there's all sorts of information, like all old videos that I had created in the past, and you can go and tap into that. So that is a good way to get started. You can get your chart at mybodygraph.com. And in there, it's going to give you, what your type is, what your authority is, also your profile. And there are many profiles, like combinations, but there are 6 profiles total. There's a line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each one has its own characteristics. And in this episode, I want to talk about what it is like navigating as a 2-4. So that is my profile. So if you are a 2-4 and you're listening to this, you're going to probably resonate with a lot of it, or maybe you might resonate with some of it, whichever. I just want to explain and share my thoughts through my experiment, how I've navigated this 2-4 in my life, how I've navigated in my business. And it has been a lot of trial and error, has been a lot of figuring out and understanding myself, and being able to use this 2-4 profile to the best I can, in order to make life smoother and easier and feel at home for me. And this 2-4, I like to call it, is the classic introvert extrovert. It is like the profile that, if I were to say it defines an introvert extrovert, this is the one. Because a line 2 is introvert and a line 4 is an extrovert, basically. Got a hermit, line 2, opportunist, line 4. And so being a 2-4, sometimes there is legit like a conundrum around it. There'll be times where I'm like, I want to be by myself, but I also want to be around people. And I honestly legit don't know what to do in those situations. And so it's been a lot interesting navigating, but then also interesting navigating the aspect of like when I am called to go more into my hermit and be more of an introvert versus like socializing and being around friends, and how I've navigated that through the years ever since learning about human design and really tapping into this profile, and how I've also used this profile in my business and how I've noticed it work for me. Also, side note, I am a self-projected projector. So a lot of how I use this profile is also coincidentally how I use my strategy and authority of like what my human design type is. So projector, self-projected, and also that means waiting for the invitation. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is going to be through that lens, but I will try and make note of, if you are a generator or a mani-gen, your strategy is to respond. Your authority is also going to be a little different. And in human design, no matter which levels you go through, whether it's you start tapping into the profiles and learning about that, or the gates, the channels, the variables, all these aspects, it always goes back to your strategy and authority. It always goes back to that. Like that is like the number one thing to really focus on. And then once you, and honing that, and then you can figure out the rest of your chart based on your strategy and authority. And so where am I going to start with this? Line 2 profile. So I think actually I'm going to start with one of the biggest aha moments I've realized with that line 2-4 profile is when it comes to healing and inner work. So I always was frustrated for the longest time, and sometimes bitter, my not self theme, which I know, where there'll be the same lesson appearing over and over, like the same thoughts, like thinking I have healed it, thinking I have worked through it, and then it comes up again. And I remember being so frustrated around that, because it's like, oh, here we go again. Like, why am I going through this again? And if you do have, I believe, gate 44 as well, this is something that can appear for you too. Gate 44 is repetitive patterns and repetitive, like in the fear of the past, repeating itself. But what it is really surrendering to the repetitive patterns and learning the lesson. And then when it comes to having that line 2-4, it's like a pendulum. So the line 2-4 doesn't have the energy to fully heal everything all at once. It needs to kind of go through it, like go once, learn a little bit of the lesson, whatever needs to be seen, navigate that, and then kind of like, and then that, like, it's going into that hermit mode of a really introvert, self-reflecting, figuring out what the lesson is. And then you move to that line 4 of like, okay, let me come up for air because this is a lot. And as a projector, I don't have the same energy levels as a generator or a mani-gen. Maybe a mani-gen and generator, you guys might not go as back and forth through the healing and the repetitive patterns as much as I do. But sometimes it does require, depending on the lesson, depending on what needs to be healed, how big it is. Sometimes you may need to go through it more than once because of your line 2-4. And so you heal one aspect, and it's like you push that rock like up the mountain at like one tiny step, and then it's like, okay, you come up for air, you come up in your line 4, you're like, okay, I'm ready to socialize, ready to see my friends, ready for all that. And then something happens, either, something external happens where you find yourself back in that repetitive pattern, or a thought comes up that that you're like, let's say you're working through the whole, like, you are not worthy of clients, or you're not worthy of making a lot of money, and that those thoughts come up again, and you're beating yourself up, and you're like, well, I already thought I healed this, like, comes up again. And then that's when you're being called again to go back into that hermit and look at it in either a deeper level, or look at something that you didn't see before. And so I've noticed that a lot with the 2-4. And the other thing is that as I've done a lot of inner work and a lot of healing when it comes to, those thoughts, and working through the thoughts, working through the, the beating yourself up, or like the negative thoughts, as I've worked through them more and more, they become a whisper, and they're not as loud as they once were. So, for example, one of the things, like the inner thoughts that I had was that took me a while to heal, was when I would launch a program. I would go through the whole launch process, for example, and I, do the graphics, like prepare everything to post it on social media, do the landing page, all of that. And the minute I launch it, what would happen is I would like put it out there, and then 5 minutes later, well, nobody signed up. And I remember that was something like right away. Nobody signed up, and it's like, but I didn't even give it a chance. I didn't give it a moment. And that was something I needed to work through and understand, like, what is the rush? Like, why do I feel like the need for people to sign up right away? And that was like the validation, right? The validation that I wanted someone else to give me, that what I was offering was good enough. But I wasn't giving that validation to myself. So that's what I had to come to terms with. But the way I navigated this healing, like in that 2-4 profile, was, so obviously when I first recognized it, because at first I didn't recognize it, but when I first became aware of it, it would be after 5 minutes of launching a program, and then I'm like, okay, nobody signed up, nobody's going to sign up, blah blah blah. And then after that, the next time I did a launch, like as I worked through it and really dove deep into what it was that I was like, so like trying to control around that, then it wasn't 5 minutes, then it was like maybe 2-3 hours later, and then it was a day, and then that voice wasn't as loud as it once was. And so that is what I've learned about the healing as a 2-4. It is that slower process, and sometimes it is going through something a little bit more than once, because maybe there's something more to unravel, or seeing something from a different perspective. And then you kind of put it together, and then eventually you get to the place, like now if I launch, I'm like, okay, people are going to sign up for it, great. If they don't sign up for it, that's cool too. I trust the process, I trust myself. If nobody doesn't sign up for it, then maybe this is not a program meant to be done right now. Maybe this is something that will be tackled down the road. Maybe and maybe reevaluate myself and be like, wait, why am I launching this program? And then I think I am going to tap into like the 2-4 as how I navigate my business and my gifts. Because line 2 hermit, what that is that we have, if you are line 2, and maybe you're not even a line 4, but you are listening to this, we have gifts that are so natural to us, right? That we don't actually need to go take a course or study for. Like they just come so naturally. The problem is that we don't recognize it. We don't, I remember so many times people would be like, oh my God, this thing you've done is like so amazing. And I'm like, well, it's not a big deal. Like I just did XYZ, like whatever. and I just couldn't grasp it. And finding out, being a 2-4 and being a line 2, is that those things are my gifts, but I don't see them just because they come so easily and naturally to me. And it is important to surround myself, and this is what I've started doing, is like surround myself with people who recognize my gifts and who point them out to me. Now, here's the thing, is that we're not meant to do monetize or kind of like use every single little gift as part of our purpose, because then it'll just be like, it'll lead to burnout, it'll be overwhelming, and then we actually won't see the ones that actually matter, the ones that are actually meant for us to follow our purpose or use it as part of our business or whatnot. And so I had to learn to figure out, based on my authority, so it's self-projected, which means I'm meant to be talking out loud and listening to the tone of my voice, whether I'm excited for something or not, based on my authority, whether or not this is something I would like to pursue. And in the past, I have, and still kind of do, like as much as I am aware of my authority, sometimes I don't always listen to it. And it's just, it is an experiment, and it is a journey and a process, like using your human design. It's not like you wake up one day and you're like, oh my God, okay, I'm going to use my authority 24/7 and life is going to be great. No, sometimes you're human, and sometimes you forget, and you're just like, oh, this seems logical, and this seems the right way to do something. Okay, I'm going to do it. But realize that actually your authority was not behind that. And so when it comes to people recognizing your gifts, you don't have to do every single one. You don't have to be like, okay, like just because somebody recognized that doesn't mean that, I'm going to create a program around it. And I've done that in the past where, I've taken my business in a direction because someone said I was good at it, but I wasn't feeling it. My authority wasn't behind it. I remember once I had a client and I just guided her to help her like schedule her time a little bit better. And she's like, oh my God, you're so organized. Like you should be like an accountability and a time management coach. And I legit thought that was what I was meant to do. And I started working my business towards that, but it wasn't landing. Like one, I was doing it because I went through that logical route. I was like, okay, well, this is like easy to sell because people would pay for this. Like, people wouldn't pay for the other coaching stuff I offer. And so I put those thoughts in my head. So I started believing that narrative, which was not true. And then it took that logical approach of like, well, I can totally charge a lot of money for this. Again, going through it with the wrong reasons. And I was going to networking events. I was doing, meeting people, talking about my business, like sharing it on social media, and it wasn't landing. Like I did not get a single client. And I think I worked on that for a year and I did not get a single, like a year and a half, I did not get a single client. And then I actually, within that year and a half, I started going through my spiritual awakening. And then that's where I realized I needed to take a back step to my business because there was a lot of inner work to work on first, before going back to my coaching business and figuring out what exactly am I here to guide people with. Excuse me. And so just because somebody recognizes your gifts doesn't mean that you are meant to do said thing. Doesn't mean that you have to do it. And so this is using your authority, as I said earlier, to navigate that. And so that is kind of one thing I've like learned a lot about being aligned to, and things are meant to be easy for us. That's a crazy thing, is that there's so much that we have these natural gifts, and honestly, like a lot of the things that I do in my business is not because I did like course after course after course after course. Like this is all my experiences and what I've learned in life and who I am as a person. I I am a really good listener. I am very good at picking up like the subtle things that somebody talks about and go deeper. And I go deeper naturally. I didn't take a course on how to go deep. I didn't, I didn't take a course on inner child healing and shadow work. Or the only thing I did do is I did do an initial course on human design. And then I continued to learn human design through either other coaches that I know there is one individual that I have worked with in human design, and she's a line 1-3. Line 1 is investigator, which they love doing research. And so she has also, and she's, I think, in year 6 or 7 of her experiment. And so she has done a lot of research, and I know she knows her stuff. So I just go and I learn from her, for example. Or I got certain human design books that she has recommended for me to dive deep. And then that's how I learn. And then that's how I dive deeper. But then I also I love observing people as a projector. I love watching people. And this is where I, would put, friends and family on human design and just observe them in their natural element and how they consciously and unconsciously do things. And then this is where I would get all these like examples. And when it comes to clients come to me for either a human design reading, which I offer, and then right now I'm working on a human design program, pilot version. Round 1 is closed. We already started that, but round 2 will be opening, I believe, in September. If you are interested, I'm going to put all the information there in my in the paragraph. Anyways, in the show notes. That's what I meant to say. I can't words. And so when I do that, I have all these examples, and then I love asking my clients questions and, finding out how, life works for them and who they are and how they navigate things. And so all that for me comes easy and naturally. It's not something I've like learned in. And so if you are aligned to, like, know that you don't need to take a course for every single thing. You don't need to have a certification or a degree for your gifts. Obviously, maybe there's certain things that you do need to have certain certifications, and if you want to dive deeper, again, using your authority of like which one you feel like, where do you want to put your time and your energy and your investments towards. But it is very much really, breaking the societal norms around that, because there is these societal norms around this idea that, oh my, you have to have a certification, you have to have credentials, like, or a degree, a university degree, whatever it is, like, for you to be considered an expert. But time and time again, there are so many people out there that, especially in line twos, like, but they're not even line twos, but like there's a lot of people out there that don't have this giant list. But what they do have is referrals. What they do have is testimonials and people vouching for them. And this is where the line 4 comes in. So as a line 4, if you are listening to this, this is like the socialization. This is word of mouth. This is going out and meeting people. And using like testimonials. So in business, like, yeah, I would receive testimonials. I put some of those up in my website. I've also like shared them on social media. Also receive like, referrals, like people like being like, hey, I worked with Julie, like here's her socials, and then they follow me. And I've noticed that also like on a friends level as well, meeting new people. So line 2, 4, not meant to become friends with strangers. We navigate things a little, our energy and aura navigates things a little bit differently. Like even if you are a manager and generator, or a manifestor or a reflector, this is across the board for all line 2, 4. It's not just a projector. And what I've noticed is that it takes time, like, to make friends. Either I get introduced from other people, and then and people have that sense of trust because someone else introduced me to them, and they're like, okay, get to know you. Sometimes it ends up that I become with them friends right away. Other times it just takes a little bit of time, but usually that referral, that line 4 referral. The other aspect, what I've noticed is that showing up to the same places over and over, and a meeting, seeing the same faces, maybe in the beginning, like, yes, you chat with them, they're a stranger, but you're not BFFs, like they're not inviting you out for cocktails after. It takes time for them to see you a little bit over and over, and maybe have that small talk in the beginning until they become more and more comfortable. And then eventually it gets to a place where either, you decide, both of you simultaneously, depending on your strategy, whether you are waiting as a projector for the invitation for the other person to invite you in, or if you are a manager and generator, you can respond. If the other person makes a hint of potentially like going out for dinner or drinks, or if you are a manifestor, you can initiate that right away. And so depending on your strategy, you can use that and to continue building that relationship. But like becoming friends, it doesn't happen. It is very rare. I've never had it actually happen that I've become BFFs with someone right away from meeting them as a 2-4. It's taken time. It is very much repetitive, like seeing the same people in the same situations. So a lot of my friends in the past are people that, like my long-term friends are people I've worked with. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like all my longest friends, people I've worked with, people I went to school with. Right, they see it's that same repetitive face, like same aspect, same places that you show up. You go to school, you take that class, you're in that class every day, or like people that I joined a sorority when I was in university, so same thing. And then after moving away from Montreal and coming out to Whistler, in BC in general, it was showing up. Like I volunteered at the food bank in Tofino, so I met friends through there, and them seeing me there all the time. In Whistler, I would go hang out at the brewery, and so I became friends with the people who were hanging out there, and then also the people that worked there, because they were seeing my face all the time. And this is how I made friends. But it didn't happen right away. It wasn't I met them and then it was like, oh, they invited me in. It was I showed up continuously, and then eventually they invited me to sit with them, and then eventually it was, oh, like, let's hang out outside of this establishment or outside of work. And so that is like what I've noticed as a 2-4 when it comes to that, friends and making new friends. Yeah, and then the other thing was interesting when as a line 2, so a line 2 hermit, like I like to kind of go in my own world and not socialize with people. And what I've noticed is that the people who are extremely close to me, so usually family members, and right now my partner, I can hermit with them around. I have no problem. Like I remember like in the times where I was hermiting, I was okay having my sister around. I'm okay having my partner around, but I don't want to socialize with anybody else. And so it's like almost like as a hermit, you have an inner circle and you're okay with hermiting with the inner circle of whatever you need to work through. You're okay with them being in your space. Sometimes you do want to get yourself out into your own space, and that is for so many other reasons in human design, because you can be plugging into their energy, and it is good to be in your energy. And I do have a time and space where I go in my own little bubble. Like right now I'm in my own nice little bubble and creating this episode. But right now I am at a place where I feel like I'm a little bit more hermiting. And so yeah, I go home and I don't mind having dinner and sitting down and watching TV with my partner. Or when, before this, when me and my sister both lived in Tofino, like I didn't mind just like hanging out with her, and we would watch, we had our routine of watching RuPaul's Drag Race together, but I didn't want to see any other friends. And so that's okay as a hermit. And then it's also okay as a hermit to completely go in on your own. It is actually important for a hermit to kind of be in own space. It's nurturing. This is like being in hermit mode is where you like work on your gifts, is where you go in and you heal, but it's also, it gives you a break. It gives you that time for peace, that time to slow down, time to just be and be in that present moment. And yeah, so I'm navigating that, but I do trust my body. That's the other thing, is I trust my body, and I trust the pull of when I feel called to hanging out with people and when I feel being in my own bubble. So like one thing I have noticed is sometimes like the universe, not always, but sometimes the universe works with me in that aspect. Especially if I'm at a place where I'm like, I want to see all the people, but really I'm meant to like be doing some inner work. Plans will fall through. So when I know I'm meant to be a hermit is when like either my friends are MIA, like they're in their own little world doing their own little thing, or like we made plans, they fall through, they don't happen. Nobody's around. And then that's when I know I'm meant to hermit. Other times I just feel called to being in my own little bubble. But I also, like, if I feel called to reaching out to somebody, I'll reach out to them and I'll be like, hey, let's hang out on this day. And then that kind of gives me a little bit of that line 4 to get out. And sometimes what happened is because the line 2-4, the line 2 is on the conscious. So, and the line 4 is on the unconscious. And as a line 2, sometimes you can get a little too comfortable in the hermit. And so this is where it's important to pay attention to the cues of your environment, of when you are being called to go into the opportunist, go into that socialization and being around people again. Just because sometimes we can get a little too like, oh, this bubble's nice. Like, I can just stay here. And I would usually have sometimes people reach out to me to pull me out. My partner is actually really good at pulling me out and being like, hey, come here, come there. So he's really good at that. And obviously, again, I listen to my intuition and my authority around that, because sometimes it is a little, it can be a little too much for me because I am a projector and my energy levels are not the same. He's a generator. And so it is a matter of listening to your authority and your intuition, but also paying attention to your environment and the cues that your environment and the universe is giving you. So if you are feeling that, there are all these signs of like, let's say you're on Instagram and there's these like in-person events in your town, maybe that's a sign for you to like get out and socialize a little more. And kind of get and use your opportunists, right? Because your opportunist, that is a word of mouth. That is how you meet people. That is how you get opportunities to unfold for you. And so another thing that I wanted to tap into with the 2-4 is that we are meant to go to the beat of our own drum. We are not meant to be doing things just like everybody else. We are meant to be doing things that light us up, that is exciting for us. And so, for example, with this podcast, like I remember like when I first launched it, and like I do this a lot too. I've done it a lot on my socials, and I guess just because this is my way of like interacting with my audience, but also I have to be very mindful of when I do this, is I'll ask my audience a lot of like what they want, what they want to hear from me, or where they are at. And that is just because I want to interact with my audience. But also as a projector, it's, I'm not here to respond. I'm not a generator. I'm not a mani-gen. And so I had to like learn to navigate that a little bit differently, and like what that means to me. Because if I'm going and, putting it out there of like what people want to hear, and I'm creating these episodes based on what my audience wants to hear, but maybe I'm not lit up about it, then there's a little bit of like a misconnection here that is not going to work based on being a 2-4 and a projector. And so I do sometimes ask my audience what they would like to hear, and just to see where they are at and what they're thinking and what season of life they're in. But at the same time, I take that and then I'm like, okay, what am I excited to talk about? Because like this was like, I'm in this process right now where this is the second episode I'm recording in a row, just because I feel extremely inspired. And as an example, like next week is Lionsgate Portal. Like on August 8th, I don't know when I'm gonna actually post this episode, but on August 8th, Lionsgate Portal, and I was like, oh, like maybe I should ask my audience if they want me to do an episode on that. But then I was looking at it and I was like, I'm really not feeling it. Like, I really don't feel like talking about it. I don't know why. There's no reasoning why or why not. And I have to listen to that, because as a 2-4, I'm supposed to create episodes that I'm like, oh, like this is fun. This is exciting. Like I'm lit up by it. And this is where, everybody else is going to watch me, because as a 2-4, well, line 2, we are here to be observed, and people love watching us. Line 2, they love watching us. Like it's really interesting, especially on social media, seeing who watches my stories. Like I find this so interesting. But we are just meant to do what lights us up. And even as a projector too, like just doing my own thing, do what lights me up. And then people are like, oh, cool. Like, this is like what you're doing. This is what you're good at. Like, I want to learn more. And then that's how I receive the invitations. And then here we are. Right. And so I wanted to mention that, because it is very easy to get caught up in asking permission to do things, especially when we feel it's like what we're excited and what feels right for us to do. And so that is, I feel like I rambled on a lot, but that is basically my experience so far as a 2-4. Obviously, there's like just so much more I can talk about, but I wanted to kind of like wrap it up here. And if this episode landed or resonated with you in any way, please let me know in the comments, like it, subscribe. I would appreciate all of that. As I mentioned, like throughout the episode, is I do offer human design readings, but then I also have a human design program that I just finished the first round of the pilot. I just closed round 1 for the pilot, and I am going to do the pilot for round 2 and 3. Round 2 is going to be for September, starting in September, and round 3 is going to be in 2024. And so if go in the show notes, feel free to send me a message on Instagram, or, send me an email, use the contact form on my website, all of that. And that is basically it for today. And I feel complete. So hope you have a wonderful day, evening, whenever you're listening to this, and I will see you next time.